The number on the billionaire's phone screen was unmistakable. 10 digits that Maya had dialed 1,000 times searching for her missing sister. The tray crashed to the floor and she uttered the words that would change everything. "I know that number. It's my sister's." Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching us from. Let's go. Some numbers brand themselves into your memory like scars that never quite fade. For Maya Chun, that number was 10 digits she'd dialed 1,000 times until the day it went silent. For 3 years, she'd carried those numbers in her heart like stones, each one a weight of unanswered questions and sleepless nights. She was just trying to survive her Thursday evening shift at Billionaire, the kind of restaurant where a single appetizer cost more than her weekly grocery budget. He was just another wealthy executive in an endless parade of suits who barely saw the people serving them. But sometimes fate doesn't whisper, sometimes it screams. And when Maya caught a glimpse of the screen of his phone, those 10 digits staring back at her like ghosts made flesh, her world didn't just tilt, it shattered completely, taking with it every fragile piece of normal she'd managed to rebuild. The crystal chandeliers of Billionaire cast prismatic light across white linen tablecloths, creating an atmosphere of refined elegance that Maya Chun had learned to navigate like a tightrope walker. At 27, she'd perfected the art of invisible service, the ability to anticipate needs without being noticed, to exist in the spaces between courses and conversation. It was a survival skill she'd honed over 3 years of working in establishments where the clientele spent more on wine than she earned in a month. The Thursday evening crowd was the usual mix of business executives closing deals, wealthy couples celebrating anniversaries, and the occasional celebrity trying to maintain some semblance of privacy in a city that thrived on recognition. Maya moved through the dining room with practiced efficiency, her black uniform immaculate, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail that emphasized the delicate features she'd inherited from her mother, Korean-American, raised in a modest neighborhood where every dollar counted. She'd learned early that the world was divided into those who had and those who served. She'd never resented it, not really. It was simply the architecture of reality. But tonight, beneath the professional smile and the graceful choreography of her movements, exhaustion pulled at her bones. It was the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix, the weariness that came from carrying grief like a second skin. Her younger sister Lily had been missing for 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. Not a single hour passed without Maya feeling the absence like a phantom limb. Lily, brilliant and reckless, 22 years old with dreams too big for her own good, had vanished one October evening after saying she'd discovered something important, something that would change everything. The police had investigated, filed reports, and eventually moved on to cases with actual leads. Her parents, immigrants who'd sacrificed everything to give their daughters a better life, had aged a decade in those 3 years, hope slowly calcifying into resignation. Maya refused to let go. Every spare moment, every day off, she'd searched. She'd walked the streets where Lily was last seen, interviewed friends until they stopped answering her calls, filed missing persons reports in 3 states. She'd memorized every detail of that last phone conversation. The excitement in Lily's voice, the way she'd said she was meeting someone who could verify what she'd found, and then nothing. Silence. The phone number Maya had called countless times, the one she still dialed sometimes in the desperate hours of sleepless nights, remained disconnected. The carrier had no information. It was as if Lily had simply evaporated. The bell at the host stand chimed, pulling Maya from the dark waters of memory. She glanced toward the entrance and felt the restaurant's energy shift subtly, the way a room changes when someone truly powerful enters. The man who walked through the door didn't announce himself, but power radiated from him like heat from a furnace. Tall, perhaps in his late 30s, with the kind of sharp features that suggested both intelligence and ruthlessness. His suit was bespoke, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. His shoes gleamed with fresh polish. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and when his eyes swept the room, there was a calculated assessment in his gaze that made Maya instinctively straighten her posture. The host, Marcus, practically bowed as he approached. "Mr. Aldridge, your usual table is ready. We've chilled the Chateau Margaux as you requested." The man nodded once, a gesture that conveyed acknowledgement without gratitude. He moved through the restaurant with the confidence of someone accustomed to spaces rearranging themselves around him. Maya had served enough wealthy men to recognize the type. Self-made or inherited, it didn't matter. They all wore their success like armor, impenetrable and isolating. This one, apparently named Aldridge, settled into a corner booth that offered both privacy and a commanding view of the dining room, the kind of seat reserved for people who needed to see without being seen. Maya's section manager Richard approached her with his tablet. "You've got the VIP in booth 7. That's Julian Aldridge, CEO of Meridian Technologies. He tips well, but he's demanding. Perfect service, no small talk." She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Understood. She took a moment to center herself, pushing thoughts of Lily back into the locked compartment in her mind where she kept everything too painful for daily examination. She grabbed a leather-bound menu and a crystal water glass, arranged her face into professional pleasantness, and approached the booth. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Billionaire." She set the water glass down with practiced precision. "My name's Maya, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. Can I start you with something from the bar while you review the menu?" Julian Aldridge looked up from his phone, and for a brief moment his eyes met hers. They were an unusual shade of gray, cold and analytical. He studied her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, as if he were cataloging her features for some future reference. "Just water for now. I'm expecting a call." His voice was low and authoritative, the kind of voice accustomed to being obeyed. "Of course. I'll give you a moment with the menu." She retreated, feeling the weight of his gaze follow her before returning to his phone. The dining room hummed with quiet conversation and the delicate clink of silverware on china. Maya moved through her other tables, refilling wine glasses, clearing plates, maintaining the seamless flow that kept Luminaire's reputation intact. But she found her attention drawn back to booth 7, to the man who sat alone, his phone commanding more of his attention than the exquisite surroundings. 20 minutes later, she returned to take his order. He barely glanced at the menu. The tasting menu. "Start with the oysters, and keep the water coming. Is there anything else I can get for you?" "Not unless you can make my board of directors less incompetent." The comment wasn't meant to be funny, just a statement of fact. Maya offered a diplomatic smile. "I'll see what I can do." As she turned to leave, his phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with an incoming text. She shouldn't have looked. Professional servers didn't read their customers' private messages. It was an unspoken rule, a boundary that separated good service from intrusion. But something made her glance down. Perhaps it was the particular angle of the light. Perhaps it was fate. Perhaps it was Lily, reaching out from wherever she was, guiding Maya's eyes to the one thing that would change everything. The text was brief, visible for only a second before Aldridge picked up the phone, but the sender's name and number were crystal clear at the top of the screen. The name was listed as L. Chun. The number was 10 digits Maya had memorized so completely that she saw them in her dreams. It was Lily's number, her missing sister's disconnected, vanished, tin-to-thin-air phone number. Possible. Her mind screamed the word even as her body reacted. The tray in her hands, empty except for 2 wine glasses she'd been clearing from another table, suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Time stretched, became elastic and strange. She heard the crash before she felt her fingers let go, the spectacular shattering of crystal against marble floor, the splash of residual wine across white linen and polished wood. The entire restaurant went silent. Every head turned. Maya stood frozen, staring at Julian Aldridge. At the phone he now held closer to his chest. His expression transformed from mild annoyance to something harder and more dangerous. Her voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper, but in the profound silence of the room it carried like a shout. "That number. I know that number." The phone in his hand might as well have been a bomb. His eyes narrowed and she saw recognition flash across his face. Not of her, but of a situation suddenly spiraling beyond his control. That's my sister's number." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible, as $200 worth of shattered crystal glittered on the floor like accusations. The silence that followed Maya's declaration lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity suspended in glass. Julian Aldridge's face transformed from surprise to a carefully constructed mask of controlled neutrality, the kind of expression powerful men wore when caught off guard but refusing to show weakness. He slowly placed his phone face down on the table, a deliberate motion that felt like a door closing. Around them, the restaurant began to breathe again. Conversations resumed in hushed tones, though Maya could feel every eye in the room stealing glances at the scene unfolding in booth 7. Richard materialized at her elbow with the efficiency of a man trained to handle disasters. "Maya," his voice was low and urgent, tinged with barely concealed panic. "What's going on? Are you all right?" She couldn't answer him. Her eyes were locked on Julian Aldridge, on the phone that now lay hidden against the pristine white tablecloth. That number belonged to Lily. There was no mistake, no possibility of coincidence. She had dialed those digits so many times they were burned into her muscle memory, carved into the architecture of her grief. "You're mistaken." Aldridge's voice cut through her paralysis, smooth and dismissive. It was the tone of someone accustomed to being believed without question. "You saw a phone number for a fraction of a second. The human mind is prone to pattern recognition errors, especially when under stress." His words were perfectly reasonable, logical even, but there was something underneath them, a slight tension in his jaw that suggested he was working very hard to appear calm. "I'm not mistaken." Maya's voice gained strength, fueled by 3 years of unanswered questions and suppressed rage. "That was my sister's number. Lily Chun. She's been missing for 3 years. The accusation hung between them, raw and desperate. Richard's hand tightened on her arm. "Maya, you need to step away, now. Let me handle this." But she couldn't move. Every instinct screamed that if she walked away from this moment, she would lose the only lead she'd had in over 1,000 days of searching. Julian Aldridge studied her with those cold gray eyes, and she saw the moment he made his calculation, weighing his options with the speed of a man who made billion-dollar decisions before breakfast. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim leather wallet, extracting several bills without counting them. $500 landed on the table next to the phone. "For the glasses and your distress." His tone was final, a period at the end of a sentence he considered closed. But Maya saw something else in his face now, a flicker of something that looked almost like recognition or perhaps concern. Richard tried to pull her away, his professional composure fraying. "Maya, you're being inappropriate. Miss Aldridge is a valued customer. You need to apologize and step away immediately." The other diners were no longer pretending not to watch. This was better than dinner theater, a real-life drama unfolding between courses. Maya felt the weight of their stares, the judgment, the assumption that she was some unhinged employee having a breakdown. Perhaps she was. Perhaps 3 years of grief had finally cracked through her carefully maintained facade. But then Julian Aldridge did something unexpected. He held up one hand, a gesture that stopped Richard mid-sentence. "It's fine." He looked directly at Maya, and for the first time there was something almost human in his expression. "You said your sister has been missing for 3 years?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. "And you're certain about the number?" "Absolutely certain. Every digit. I could recite it in my sleep." He was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming once against the table in a gesture that seemed unconscious, a crack in his controlled exterior. "Then I think we should talk, but not here." His gaze swept the room, taking in the dozens of curious faces. Too many witnesses. He stood, his height and presence seeming to fill the space. He picked up his phone and the cash, leaving the bills on the table. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. His hand moved to his jacket pocket and emerged with a business card, which he placed where the money had been. "My office. Come alone." Before Maya could respond, he was moving toward the exit, his stride purposeful and quick. The maitre d' rushed to intercept him, concerned about the abrupt departure, but Aldridge waved him off with a few quiet words and was gone, leaving Maya standing amid broken crystal and the ruins of her carefully controlled life. Richard's face had gone from panic to fury. My office now. The walk through the restaurant to the manager's cramped back office felt like a death march. She could feel the stares, hear the whispered speculation. The kitchen staff watched through the service window with a mixture of sympathy and morbid curiosity. Richard closed the door and turned to face her, his expression a careful blend of concern and professional obligation. "Maya, I've known you for 2 years. You're one of our best servers, but what just happened out there was completely unacceptable. You disrupted service, you made a scene with one of our most important clients, and you made wild accusations." She wanted to explain, to make him understand that this wasn't hysteria or delusion, but the words tangled in her throat. "I saw her number, my missing sister's number, on his phone." Richard's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "I know about your sister. I know what you've been through, but you can't bring personal trauma into the workplace like this. Mr. Aldridge could complain to ownership. He could sue us. Do you understand the position you've put me in? I'm sorry." The words felt hollow. "I didn't plan this. I just saw it and I reacted." He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I'm gonna have to send you home for the rest of the night. Take tomorrow off too. When you come back, we'll discuss whether this is still the right fit." The message was clear. Her job hung by a thread. In any other circumstance, that would have terrified her. She needed this income. Her parents needed her help with their mounting bills. But all she could think about was the business card burning in her pocket and the impossible fact that a billionaire CEO had her dead sister's phone number. She changed out of her uniform in the staff locker room, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage the buttons. Her coworker and friend Sarah found her there, perched on the narrow bench between lockers. "I heard what happened." Sarah sat beside her, her presence warm and solid. "Are you okay?" Maya let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "I don't know. I saw Lily's number, Sarah, on his phone. After 3 years of nothing, I saw her number." Sarah took her hand, squeezing gently. "What are you going to do?" Maya pulled out the business card, studying the embossed lettering. Julian Aldridge, Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Technologies. An address in the financial district, the kind of gleaming skyscraper that seemed to touch the clouds. "I'm going to that meeting. I'm going to find out why he has my sister's number and what he knows about where she is. You need to be careful." Sarah's voice carried a note of warning. "Men like that, men with that kind of power and money, they don't play by the same rules as the rest of us. If he's involved in something bad, something that made your sister disappear, confronting him could be dangerous." The thought had crossed Maya's mind, a cold whisper in the back of her consciousness. What if Julian Aldridge wasn't a lead to finding Lily? What if he was the reason Lily was gone? But the alternative, doing nothing, letting this moment slip away, was unthinkable. She'd spent 3 years drowning in helplessness. For the first time since Lily vanished, she had something concrete, a thread she could pull. The subway ride home was a blur of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic clatter of rails. Maya clutched her bag against her chest, feeling the weight of the business card inside like a talisman or a curse. She lived in a studio apartment in a neighborhood that was euphemistically called transitional, a place where sirens were the soundtrack to sleep and rent was just barely manageable. It was a far cry from the childhood home where she and Lily had shared a bedroom, whispered secrets in the dark, and dreamed of futures that seemed limitless. She unlocked 3 separate locks on her door, a necessity in a building where security was theoretical at best, and stepped into the cramped space she called home. The apartment was tidy but sparse, decorated with hand-me-down furniture and the kind of minimalism that came from necessity rather than aesthetic choice. On the narrow bookshelf beside her futon there was a photograph in a simple frame. Maya and Lily taken 4 years ago at their parents' anniversary dinner. Lily was laughing, her head thrown back, her long black hair catching the light. Maya stood beside her, more reserved, but with an expression of pure affection as she looked at her sister. Maya picked up the photograph, tracing Lily's face with one finger. "Where are you? What happened to you?" The questions had become a mantra, repeated so many times they'd lost their sharp edges and become something closer to prayer. She set the photo down and pulled out her laptop, a battered machine held together with hope and duct tape. Her fingers moved automatically, typing Julian Aldridge Meridian Technologies into the search bar. The results flooded the screen. Hundreds of articles, press releases, and profiles. She began to read, piecing together a portrait of the man who held the key to her sister's disappearance. Julian Aldridge was everywhere on the internet, yet somehow remained an enigma. Maya scrolled through article after article, each one painting him in the broad strokes reserved for the obscenely successful. At 38, he had built Meridian Technologies from a startup in his garage into a multi-billion-dollar empire specializing in data analytics and artificial intelligence. The company's software was used by Fortune 500 corporations, government agencies, and institutions around the world. His net worth was estimated at somewhere north of $4 billion, though the exact figure seemed to shift depending on which financial publication you consult. The photographs showed a man who seemed allergic to genuine smiles. In every image, whether at tech conferences, charity galas, or congressional hearings, his expression remained the same, controlled, analytical, revealing nothing. There were no paparazzi shots of him stumbling out of nightclubs, no scandalous affairs, no messy divorces. His personal life was a black hole. One profile described him as a monk devoted to the religion of innovation. Another called him the most boring billionaire in America. The consensus seemed to be that Julian Aldridge lived for his work and nothing else. Maya dug deeper, moving past the glossy profiles to the business sections and tech journals. She found articles about Meridian's controversial contracts with intelligence agencies, debates about privacy and data collection, whispers of technology that could track individuals with frightening precision. There were congressional hearings where Aldridge had testified, his responses measured and technically precise, giving away nothing while appearing to be completely transparent. He was a master of the non-answer, the kind of man who could speak for an hour and reveal absolutely nothing of substance. She found one article from 6 years ago, early in Meridian's explosive growth, that stood out from the rest. It was an investigative piece from a tech journalism website that had since gone defunct. The headline read, "The Dark Side of Data: What Meridian Technologies Doesn't Want You to Know." The article detailed allegations from former employees about projects that existed off the books, research into surveillance technology that pushed ethical boundaries, and a corporate culture that prioritized results over everything else, including legality. Most damning were the quotes from anonymous sources claiming that Meridian had developed software capable of reconstructing an individual's entire digital footprint, tracking their movements, communications, and associations with terrifying accuracy. A former engineer was quoted saying, "If Julian wanted to find someone who didn't want to be found, he could do it. The technology exists. The question isn't capability, it's whether he has the moral restraint not to use it." The article had apparently generated some buzz when it was published, but it quickly faded from public consciousness. Meridian's lawyers had issued a statement denying all allegations, and the website that published it folded 6 months later. Maya sat back, her mind racing. What if Lily had discovered something about Meridian Technologies? Something dangerous enough that someone needed to silence her? Lily had been working as a freelance investigative journalist, taking on stories that established publications considered too risky or not profitable enough. She'd been passionate about exposing corporate malfeasance, government corruption, anything that involved powerful people behaving badly. In their last conversation, Lily had been excited, almost giddy. "I found something big, Maya. Really big. I can't tell you details yet, but this could be the story that makes my career. I'm meeting someone tomorrow who can verify everything." Maya had pressed for details, worried about her younger sister's tendency to throw herself into dangerous situations without considering the consequences. "Who are you meeting? What's the story about?" But Lily had just laughed. "You know I can't reveal sources, but trust me, this is going to change everything. I'll tell you all about it next week when I have everything confirmed." Next week never came. Lily went to that meeting and vanished. Her apartment showed no signs of struggle. Her laptop was gone. Her phone went straight to voicemail and then days later was disconnected entirely. The person she'd been supposed to meet never came forward. Maya had given the police everything she knew, but without concrete evidence of foul play. Lily was classified as a voluntary missing person, an adult who had chosen to disappear. The detective assigned to the case, a tired man with kind eyes, had told Maya gently that sometimes people just needed to get away, that the pressure of adult life became too much. Maya had wanted to scream at him that he didn't know Lily, didn't understand that she would never just leave without a word, would never cause their parents such anguish. But she'd swallowed her rage and continued searching on her own. Now, staring at Julian Aldridge's face on her laptop screen, she felt the pieces beginning to align in a pattern that was both terrifying and grimly logical. What if Lily had been investigating Meridian? What if the meeting she'd gone to was with someone connected to the company? What if Julian Aldridge, with all his surveillance technology and and resources had been involved in her disappearance. The thought made Maya's stomach turn, but it also ignited something fierce inside her. If Aldridge had hurt Lily, if he knew what happened to her, Maya would make him pay, regardless of the cost. She glanced at the clock on her laptop. It was past midnight. In less than 10 hours, she would be walking into the lion's den, confronting a man who might be responsible for her sister's disappearance. Sarah's warning echoed in her mind. Men like that don't play by the same rules. Maya knew she should be terrified, should probably contact the police, should at least tell someone where she was going. But fear had been her constant companion for 3 years. She'd learned to function despite it, to push through the paralysis and keep moving forward. She opened a new browser tab and navigated to her email, composing a message to Sarah with Julian Aldridge's name, address, and the time of their meeting. "I don't contact you by noon tomorrow," she wrote. "Call the police and give them this information. Tell them about Lily. Tell them everything." She hit send and closed the laptop, feeling only marginally better. It was a precaution, but she knew that if something happened to her in that office, a delayed email wouldn't save her. Sleep was impossible. Maya lay on her futon, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift as cars passed on the street below. She thought about Lily, about all the moments they'd shared. The fights and laughter, the way Lily had always pushed boundaries while Maya played it safe. They'd been opposites in so many ways, but bound together by something deeper than similarity. Lily had been the brave one, the one who believed she could change the world. Maya had been the practical one, always worrying, always trying to protect her reckless little sister from the consequences of her own courage. And she'd failed. The guilt was a constant weight. The knowledge that she should have done more, should have stopped Lily from going to that meeting, should have been more insistent about getting details. But hindsight was its own special torture, a way of replaying your failures on an endless loop. Maya had learned that grief wasn't a linear process. It didn't move through stages toward acceptance. It was a landscape you inhabited, sometimes finding stretches of bearable terrain, other times sinking into pits of despair so deep you couldn't see the sky. The first light of dawn crept through her window, gray and hesitant. Maya gave up on sleep and got up, moving through her morning routine with mechanical precision. She showered, dressed in the only professional outfit, a dark gray pantsuit she'd bought secondhand for Lily's memorial service. The irony wasn't lost on her. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. She looked older than 27, harder, with shadows under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. At 8:30, she left her apartment and headed for the subway. The Friday morning commute was a crush of bodies and briefcases, everyone moving with the grim determination of worker bees heading to their hives. Maya felt disconnected from it all, as if she were watching the scene from behind glass. The Meridian Technologies building was in the heart of the financial district, a gleaming tower of steel and glass that seemed to slice into the sky. It was the kind of building that announced its importance through sheer architectural arrogance. Maya stood on the sidewalk across the street, craning her neck to take in the full height of the structure. Somewhere up there, Julian Aldridge was waiting. She thought about turning around, about walking away and pretending last night had never happened. She could go back to Billionaire, beg Richard for her job back, return to the numbing routine of survival. But Lily's face swam in her mind, laughing and alive, and Maya knew she couldn't walk away. Not from this. Not from the first real lead in 3 years. She crossed the street and pushed through the revolving doors into a lobby that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed intimidation was an aesthetic choice. The ceiling soared 3 stories high, the floor was polished marble that reflected like a mirror, and everything was chrome and glass and cold perfection. A security desk stood between Maya and the elevators, manned by 2 guards who looked like they'd been hired for their ability to make people feel unwelcome. She approached the desk, her heels clicking too loudly in the vast space. "I have a meeting with M.R. Aldridge, 10 a.m. Her voice sounded small and uncertain. One of the guards, a man with a shaved head and the build of a linebacker, consulted his computer screen. "Name? Maya Chun." He typed, studied the screen, and then looked up at her with an expression that suggested he was mildly surprised she existed. "You're cleared. 80th floor. You'll need a visitor badge." He handed her a lanyard with a badge that had her name printed on it. The efficiency was unsettling. Aldridge had known she would come. The elevator was empty, all steel and mirrors that reflected her anxiety back at her from every angle. The ascent was smooth and quick, the floor numbers ticking upward with digital precision. As she rose through the building, Maya felt her resolve hardening. Whatever she found up there, whatever Julian Aldridge told her or refused to tell her, she would not leave without answers. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that looked more like a museum than an office. Everything was white and minimalist, from the furniture to the abstract art on the walls. A woman sat behind a curved white desk, her expression as carefully designed as the space around her. "Maya Chun for Mira Aldridge." The receptionist's smile was professional and completely devoid of warmth. "He's expecting you. Please follow me." She led Maya down a corridor lined with glass-walled conference rooms, each empty and perfect. At the end of the hall was a set of double doors. The receptionist knocked once and opened them without waiting for a response. "Mr. Aldridge." Miss Chun is here. The office was a study in controlled power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, making Maya feel as though she were suspended in the sky. The furniture was expensive but austere, all clean lines and muted colors. Julian Aldridge stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, looking out at the urban landscape spread below like a game board. He didn't turn when she entered, and the receptionist withdrew silently, closing the doors with a soft click that felt final. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Maya stood just inside the doors, acutely aware of the power dynamic at play. This was his territory, his kingdom, and she was a supplicant seeking audience. But she refused to let the intimidation work. She'd come too far, waited too long to be cowed by expensive real estate and a good view. Mr. Aldridge, her voice cut through the silence, steady despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. You said we should talk. He turned slowly, and in the morning light she could see him more clearly than she had in the dim ambiance of the restaurant. His face was all angles and planes, handsome in an austere way, but there was something haunted in his eyes that the carefully constructed exterior couldn't quite hide. He gestured to one of two leather chairs positioned in front of his massive desk. Please, sit. She remained standing. I'd prefer to stand. I won't be here long. I just need answers. A faint smile touched his lips, though it held no humor. You have more courage than sense, Ms. Chun. Most people don't refuse a request from me twice in 12 hours. This isn't about ego or power games. This is about my sister. You have her phone number. I want to know why. He studied her for a moment longer, then moved to his desk, pressing a button on his phone console. Margaret, hold all my calls. No interruption. He settled into his chair, the leather creaking softly, and finally spoke the words that would begin to unravel everything Maya thought she knew. Your sister isn't missing. She's dead. The words hit Maya like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs. She'd known on some level that Lily was likely gone. 3 years of silence didn't suggest a happy ending, but hearing it stated so baldly, with such certainty, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. The room tilted and she gripped the back of the chair to steady herself. How do you know that? Her voice was barely a whisper. How can you possibly know that? Because I'm the reason she's dead. Julian Aldridge's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, a flicker of what might have been guilt or grief. Not directly. I didn't order her death. I didn't even know she existed until it was too late. But the circumstances that led to her disappearance, the events that ended her life, they all trace back to me and to Meridian Technology. The admission hung in the air between them, monstrous and surreal. Maya felt her knees weaken, and this time she did sink into the chair, her body no longer able to support the weight of what she was hearing. You need to explain. Now. Every word. Julian leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. 3 years ago, Meridian was developing a surveillance system called Argus. It was designed for national security applications, the kind of technology that could track individuals across multiple platforms, reconstruct their digital footprints, predict their movements. The government was very interested. So were some less savory clients. I was the CEO, but I wasn't involved in every project. I trusted my executives to handle the details. He paused and Maya saw something crack in his carefully maintained composure. That trust was misplaced. My chief technology officer, a man named Victor Reeves, was running Argus as a side business. He was selling access to the system to private clients, corporations, individuals, anyone willing to pay his price. It was illegal, unethical, and I had no idea what's happening. Your sister found out. Maya's mind raced, fitting pieces together. Lily had been investigating something big. She'd said it would make her career. An illegal surveillance system being sold on the black market would definitely qualify. How did she find out? Julian's expression darkened. One of Victor's clients used Argus to track his ex-wife. He violated a restraining order, showed up at her new apartment, and assaulted her. She survived and went to the police. During the investigation, it came out that he'd hired someone to track her digitally. The trail led back to Victor, though it took months to connect the dots. Your sister was freelancing for a tech journalism site. Someone tipped her off about the connection to Meridian. Maya felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet, not in front of him. She was meeting someone who could verify the story. That's what she told me. Was it Victor Reeves? No. Julian's voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. It was worse than that. Lily was smart enough to know she needed ironclad proof before going public with accusations against a company like Meridian. She somehow managed to make contact with someone inside the organization, someone who claimed to have evidence of the illegal sales. The meeting was supposed to be a handoff, documents in exchange for anonymity, but it was a trap. The words were a statement, not a question. Maya knew how these stories end. Julian nodded slowly. Victor found out about the leak. I don't know how. Maybe he had his own surveillance on his team, or maybe someone got scared and talked. Either way, he knew Lily was getting close. He sent someone to that meeting instead of the whistleblower. Maya's hands clenched into fists. What happened to her? Tell me exactly what happened. I don't know all the details. Julian's voice was quiet now, stripped of its usual authority. What I do know is that Lily never came home from that meeting. Her body was never found. 6 months later, I discovered what Victor had been doing. There was an internal audit that uncovered irregularities in the Argus project. I brought in external investigators, and the whole operation came to light. Victor and 3 of his associates were arrested. They're currently serving federal sentences for conspiracy, illegal surveillance, and a host of other charges. Maya's voice was sharp, cutting, but not murder. Julian met her gaze directly. There was never enough evidence to charge them with murder. No body, no witnesses, no physical proof that anything criminal happened at that meeting. The prosecutors tried to build a case based on circumstantial evidence and cell phone data, but it wasn't enough. Victor claims he never hurt anyone, that Lily simply disappeared. His lawyers argued that without proof of death, there's no murder charge. The injustice of it made Maya want to scream. So he gets away with it. He kills my sister and he serves a few years for white-collar crime. Julian's jaw tightened, got 25 years. It's not enough, I know, but it's what the system allowed. After the arrests, I spent months trying to piece together what happened. I hired private investigators, offered rewards for information, anything to find out the truth. That's how I have Lily's number in my phone. It's part of a file I keep on her case. Why? Maya demanded. Why do you care? You didn't know her. You said yourself you weren't directly involved. Because I own Meridian Technologies. Julian's voice had an edge of steel now, a fierceness that surprised her. Every decision made under my company's name is my responsibility, whether I personally made it or not. Victor Reeves worked for me. He used my company's resources to commit his crimes. And a young woman with her whole life ahead of her died because I wasn't paying attention to what was happening in my own organization. The guilt in his words was genuine, Maya realized. This wasn't a performance or a legal strategy. Julian Aldridge carried the weight of Lily's death, and it had marked him in ways that weren't visible from the outside. You've been searching for her all this time. Not just her. There were other victims of Victor's operation. People who were stalked, harassed, had their privacy violated. I've been trying to make it right, or as right as it can be. I set up a victims fund, paid for therapy, legal fees, anything they needed. But for Lily, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even tell her family what happened because I didn't have proof, just theories and circumstantial evidence. Maya felt the room spinning around her, the weight of 3 years of unknowing suddenly replaced by the crushing certainty of loss. All this time, she'd held on to a thread of hope, the possibility that Lily was alive somewhere, that there would be a reunion, an explanation, a happy ending that would make the suffering worthwhile. That hope was gone now, burned away by the cold reality of Julian Aldridge's confession. Why tell me now? Why not just deny everything when I confronted you at the restaurant because you deserved the truth? Julian stood, moving to the window, his silhouette dark against the bright sky. I've spent 3 years living with the knowledge of what happened, unable to share it with the people who needed to know most. When you said Lily's name, when you recognized her number, I realized I'd been given a chance to finally do something right. You've been searching for her. You deserve to know that you can stop searching, that you can grieve. The word should have brought some kind of closure, but instead, Maya felt only a vast emptiness. Knowing Lily was dead didn't make the pain less. It just made it different, traded the agony of uncertainty for the finality of loss. I need proof. Her voice was hollow. I need something to take to my parents, to the police. I can't just accept your word. Julian turned back to her and she saw understanding in his face. I know. That's why I'm going to give you everything I have. All the investigation files, the evidence against Victor, the timeline we reconstructed. You'll have access to everything Meridian's lawyers and investigators uncovered. It won't bring her back, but maybe it will give you some peace. Maya stood on shaking legs, feeling the full weight of the morning pressing down on her. Part of her wanted to rage at him, to scream and break things, to make him hurt the way she was hurting. But another part recognized that Julian Aldridge was already hurting, that he'd been carrying this burden alone, and that in his own broken way he was trying to make amends. When can I see the files? Today, if you want. He moved to his desk, pulling out a tablet and typing quickly. I'll have everything sent to you digitally, and I can have hard copies prepared if you prefer. You'll also have my direct number. If you have questions, if you need anything, you call me. She should have thanked him, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, turning toward the door. Miss Chun, Maya. She paused, looking back at him. I'm sorry. The words were inadequate, insufficient for the magnitude of what had been taken from her, but they were sincere, and in that moment, that was all he had to offer. Maya didn't remember leaving the building. One moment she was standing in Julian Aldridge's office, the next she was on the sidewalk. The morning sun too bright, the sounds of traffic too loud. Everything felt surreal, as if she'd stepped sideways into a parallel reality where the rules of physics didn't quite apply. People rushed past her, lost in their own urgency, and she stood rooted to the spot, an island in a river of strangers. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with numb fingers and saw an email notification. The sender was Julian Aldridge. The subject line simply read, Lily Chun Investigation Files. Her thumb hovered over the message, trembling. She couldn't open it here. Not on a crowded street where anyone could see her fall apart. Maya forced her legs to move, walking without direction or purpose, just putting distance between herself and the Meridian building. She found herself in a small park, one of those pocket green spaces the city tucked between skyscrapers like an afterthought. A bench sat empty beneath a struggling tree, and she collapsed onto it, finally allowing herself to look at her phone. The email contained a secure link and a password. Below it, Julian had written, Take your time with this. Call me when you're ready to talk. You're not alone in this anymore. Maya clicked the link, entered the password, and watched as a folder structure appeared on her screen. There were hundreds of files organized by date and category. Investigation reports, witness statements, financial records, cell phone data, police reports. It was overwhelming, a digital monument to everything that had been stolen from her family. She opened the first file at random. It was a timeline meticulously constructed showing Lily's movements in the days leading up to her disappearance. Maya read through dates and times she'd memorized 3 years ago, but now there were additions. Details filled in by investigators with resources she'd never had access to. October 15th, 3 years ago, Lily had made contact with someone using an encrypted messaging app. The messages had been partially recovered from server logs. They showed Lily arranging a meeting, asking questions about Argus, being promised documentation that would prove Meridian's executives were running an illegal operation. The person she'd been messaging used the handle Conscience, and their identity remained unknown. Victor Reeves claimed he'd never heard of anyone by that name, that it must have been a fabrication, someone posing as an insider to lure Lily into a trap. But the investigators had found something interesting. Conscience had used VPN services and encryption that suggested sophisticated technical knowledge, the kind of operational security that an actual insider might employ. Maya scrolled through more files, her eyes burning from screen glare and unshed tears. There were photographs from the location where Lily's car had been found, abandoned in a parking garage 3 blocks from the meeting site. The doors had been locked, keys inside, Lily's purse on the passenger seat with her wallet still containing cash and credit cards. Everything about the scene suggested she'd left the car intending to return. Forensic reports showed no signs of struggle, no blood, no evidence of foul play. It was as if Lily had simply evaporated, but then Maya found something that made her breath catch. It was a supplementary report from one of the private investigators Julian had hired, dated 8 months ago. The investigator had interviewed residents of the building where the meeting was supposed to take place. Most remembered nothing useful, but one elderly man who lived on the 3rd floor mentioned seeing something odd that evening. A woman matching Lily's description entering the building around 8 p.m., and then 20 minutes later, the same woman leaving with a man in a dark suit. The witness said they'd seemed to be in a hurry, but not distressed. The woman was walking under her own power. Maya's hands tightened on her phone. This contradicted the narrative of an immediate abduction or murder. If Lily had left with someone willingly, what did that mean? Had she trusted her companion? Was Conscience real after all? And had something happened after they left together? The investigator's notes indicated he'd tried to find security footage from surrounding buildings but came up empty. The cameras in that area had mysteriously malfunctioned that evening, or so the building managers claimed. It was convenient, too convenient to be coincidence. She called Sarah, needing to hear a familiar voice, needing to anchor herself before she drowned in the sea of information. Sarah answered on the second ring, her voice tight with worry. Maya, thank God. I've been freaking out. Are you okay? Did you meet with him? I'm in a park somewhere in the financial district. Maya's voice sounded strange to her own ears, detached and mechanical. He told me everything. Sarah, Lily is dead. The silence on the other end of the line lasted several heartbeats. Oh, Maya, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to come get you? Not yet. I need to go through these files he sent. But I needed to hear your voice. I needed to remember that the world still exists outside of this nightmare. You don't have to do this alone. Whatever you need, I'm here. Maya felt a wave of gratitude for this woman who'd been her friend through the darkest period of her life. Thank you. I'll call you later, I promise. She hung up and returned to the files, driven by a need to know everything, to understand every detail of what had happened to Lily. Hours passed. The sun tracked across the sky, and Maya sat on that bench, reading report after report, absorbing the clinical language of investigation and death. She learned that Victor Reeves had been a brilliant programmer with a god complex and no moral compass. He'd started selling Argus Access 18 months before Lily's disappearance, making millions from clients who ranged from suspicious spouses to corporate espionage operations. The evidence against him was overwhelming, but without a body or a confession, the murder charge had never materialized. Maya found transcripts of Victor's police interviews. He maintained his innocence regarding Lily's disappearance with an arrogance that made her sick. He claimed he'd never met her, never sent anyone to meet her, or never even knew her investigation existed until after his arrest. His lawyers painted him as a greedy opportunist, not a killer. The jury had convicted him on surveillance charges, illegal wiretapping, and a dozen other counts. But the question of what happened to Lily Chun remained officially unanswered. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Maya reached the final folder in the archive. It was labeled Ongoing Concerns and contained only 3 files. The first was a memo from Julian Aldridge to his head of security dated 6 months ago, instructing increased surveillance on Victor Reeves' known associates. The second was a list of names, people who'd worked on the Argus project but hadn't been charged with crimes. Most had been questioned and cleared, but a few remained persons of interest. Maya scanned the names, recognizing none of them. The third file made her blood run cold. It was an incident report from just 2 months ago. An anonymous tip had been called into Meridian's ethics hotline, claiming that someone involved in the Argus scandal was planning to tie up loose ends. The tipster suggested that anyone asking questions about the case might be in danger. The security team had investigated but found no credible threat. Julian had added a personal note at the bottom of the report. Cannot ignore this. implementing additional security protocols. Conscience may still be out there, Maya's mind raced. Conscience was real. If they'd actually met with Lily that night, what had happened? Had they witnessed her death? Were they hiding out of fear? Or were they complicit somehow, part of Victor's operation who'd turned on him but not enough to come forward completely? The questions multiplied, each one leading to three more, a fractal pattern of uncertainty. She looked at the time on her phone and was shocked to see it was nearly 6 p.m. She'd been sitting in this park for 7 hours, and she hadn't eaten, hadn't moved, had barely blinked. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call, Julian Aldridge. She stared at the screen for a moment, then answered. "Have you gone through the files?" His voice was careful, giving her space to respond however she needed. Most of them. Maya's throat was raw, her voice hoarse. The report about the anonymous tip. Do you really think someone involved is still out there? I think it's possible. Julian sounded tired, the careful control from this morning eroded by the weight of a long day. The timing bothered me. Why warn us 2.5 years after Victor's arrest unless something had changed? What could have changed? I don't know. But I've had my security team monitoring any unusual activity related to the case. So far, nothing concrete. Just shadows and paranoia, maybe. He paused and Maya heard the clink of ice in a glass. Where are you right now? Still near your building? In a park. You've been there all day? Maya didn't answer and Julian seemed to understand. Listen, I know you probably want to be alone, but you shouldn't be processing this by yourself. Do you have someone you can stay with tonight? I have a friend. Maya thought of Sarah, of her cramped but warm apartment that smelled like vanilla candles and safety. Good. Stay with them. And Maya? Promise me you'll be careful. The report might be nothing, but if there's even a chance that someone connected to this is still active, you need to take precautions. You've confronted me very publicly at that restaurant. People noticed. Word gets around. The warning sent a chill through her. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying I don't know, and that uncertainty makes me nervous. Just be aware of your surroundings. Don't go anywhere alone at night. And if anything feels off, call me immediately. Maya ended the call and finally stood, her legs stiff from sitting so long. The park had emptied as evening fell, and she suddenly felt very exposed, very alone. She gathered her things and started walking toward the nearest subway station, Julian's words echoing in her mind. The streets were still busy with commuters heading home, but she found herself scanning faces, looking for anything suspicious, any sign that she was being watched. The paranoia was probably irrational, Maya told herself as she descended into the subway station, but rationality felt like a luxury she couldn't afford, not after learning that her sister had likely been murdered by people who'd gotten away with it. The platform was crowded with Friday evening commuters, everyone exhausted and eager to get home. Maya positioned herself in the middle of the crowd, surrounded by bodies, taking an odd comfort in the proximity of strangers. When the train arrived, she let several cars pass before boarding one that was sufficiently full, standing near the doors where she could see everyone around her. Sarah's apartment was in a neighborhood similar to Maya's, working class and worn around the edges, but it felt like a sanctuary when she finally arrived. Sarah opened the door before Maya could knock, pulling her into a fierce hug that finally broke through the shock that had been insulating her all day. Maya clung to her friend and allowed herself to cry, really cry, for the first time since leaving Julian's office. They stood in the doorway for a long time, Sarah holding her while she sobbed, whispering reassurances that felt hollow but necessary. When Maya finally pulled away, her face was blotchy and her eyes swollen, but something inside her had shifted, cracked open to let the grief flow through. Sarah guided her to the couch, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and disappeared into the kitchen. She returned with tea and chocolate, the universal remedies for disasters, small and large. Maya took the mug in both hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. I need to tell my parents. The thought had been lurking in the back of her mind all day. A looming obligation she didn't know how to face. How do I tell them? What words do I use to destroy what's left of their hope? Sarah sat beside her, tucking her legs underneath her. Maybe you start with the truth, that you found someone who knew what happened, that you have answers now, even if they're not the ones you wanted. Maya shook her head. It's not just answers, it's confirmation that she's gone. For 3 years, they've been able to imagine she's alive somewhere, that maybe she had amnesia or ran away to start over. Once I tell them, that door closes forever. She took a shaky breath. And there's more. I think whoever killed her might still be out there. Julian, the CEO, he warned me that asking questions could be dangerous. Sarah's expression shifted from sympathy to alarm. What do you mean dangerous? Maya explained the anonymous tip, the warning about loose ends, Julian's caution. Sounds paranoid, I know. But if Victor Reeves really did have Lily killed to protect his illegal operation, and if there are people who helped him who never got caught, they might not appreciate someone digging into it again. Sarah grabbed Maya's hand. Then you need to stop digging. You have your answers. You know what happened. Let the professionals handle the rest. But Maya was already shaking her head. The professionals handled it 3 years ago and came up empty. Victor is in prison, but the people who actually did the work, who actually took Lily to wherever they took her, they're still free. And this conscience person, whoever they are, they might know exactly what happened. They might be the only witness. I can't just walk away from that. Sarah's grip tightened. Maya, listen to yourself. You're talking about pursuing potential murderers. You're a waitress, not a detective. You don't have training or resources or backup. What you have is grief and anger, and those are not good guides for this kind of thing. The words stung because they were true. Maya had no idea what she was doing. She'd spent 3 years searching for Lily, but that had been different. She'd been looking for a missing person, following cold trails, talking to friends and acquaintances. This was something else entirely. This was attempting to solve a murder that law enforcement had failed to prosecute, trying to identify killers who'd successfully evaded justice. It was dangerous and probably futile, but the alternative, accepting that Lily's murderers would never face consequences, felt impossible. I have to try. Maya's voice was quiet but firm. I have to do something. Even if it's futile, even if it's dangerous, I can't just accept this and move on. Lily deserves better than that. Sarah studied her friend's face, seeing the determination that had kept Maya searching long after everyone else had given up. Okay, then we do this smart. We don't go charging in alone. We use the resources you have. This Julian Aldridge, he clearly feels guilty about what happened. Use that. Make him help you. He has investigators, security people, resources you can't access on your own. The suggestion made sense. Julian had offered his help, given her his direct number, told her to call if she needed anything. Maya had been so focused on processing the information that she hadn't thought about what came next. But Sarah was right. If she was going to pursue this, she needed allies, and Julian Aldridge, for all his complications, was positioned to be a powerful one. She pulled out her phone and stared at his contact information. It was late, nearly 9 p.m., but something told her he would answer. Successful CEOs didn't keep regular hours. He picked up on the second ring. Maya's voice carried concern. Are you all right? I'm at a friend's place, safe. She took a breath, steadying herself. I need your help, not just the files, active help. I want to find Conscience. I want to know what really happened that night. And if there are people out there who helped Victor and got away with it, I want them held accountable. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Maya, I understand the impulse, but this isn't something you should pursue alone. The people involved in this, if they're still out there, they've already shown they're willing to kill to protect themselves. I'm not asking to pursue it alone. I'm asking you to help. You have resources, investigators, security. You said you wanted to make this right. Here's your chance. Another pause, and she could almost hear him thinking, weighing risks and obligation. Julian's response when it came was measured. If I agree to this, we do it my way. That means professional investigators taking the lead, security protocols to keep you safe, and you following instructions. No cowboy heroics, no going off on your own. This isn't a movie. Real consequences exist. Maya felt a surge of relief. I can agree to that. Good. I'll set up a meeting for tomorrow. My head of security and the lead investigator who worked the original case. We'll go through everything again. See if there are any leads we missed the first time. In the meantime, I want you to send me your address. I'm assigning a security detail to watch your building tonight. She started to protest, but he cut her off. Non-negotiable. If I'm helping you do this, I'm making sure you stay alive to see it through. After she hung up, Sarah looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. Maya felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Purpose, direction. The grief was still there, would probably always be there, but now it had a channel. A way to flow towards something constructive instead of eating her alive from the inside. She spent the night at Sarah's apartment, lying awake on the couch while her friend slept in the bedroom. Maya stared at the ceiling, thinking about Lily, about the last time they'd spoken, about all the things she wished she'd said. Morning came gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that matched Maya's emotional state. She borrowed clothes from Sarah, something more appropriate for a meeting with security professionals than her waitress uniform or funeral suit. At 10 a.m., a car arrived to pick her up, a sleek black sedan with a driver who introduced himself as Marcus from Meridian's security team. The ride to Julian's building was quiet, Marcus maintaining professional silence while Maya watched the city slide past the tinted windows. She felt disconnected from it all, as if she were watching her own life from a distance. The meeting took place in a conference room on a different floor from Julian's office. When Maya arrived, 3 people were already seated at the long table. Julian stood when she entered, gesturing to the others. Maya, this is Thomas Grant, head of Meridian's security division, and Claire Rodriguez, the private investigator who led the original investigation into Lily's disappearance. Thomas was a man in his 50s with military bearing and shrewd eyes. Claire was younger, maybe 40, with short dark hair and an intensity that suggested she took her work very personally. Thank you for coming. Maya's voice was steadier than she felt. I know this is unusual, reopening a case that's been closed for 2 years. Claire leaned forward, her expression sympathetic. Miss Chun, I want you to know that this case has haunted me. I'd spent 8 months working on it, and the lack of resolution bothered me deeply. If there's any chance of finding new answers, I'm committed to helping. Thomas nodded his agreement. We've reviewed the anonymous tip from 2 months ago. While we initially assessed it as low credibility, given your recent involvement, we're taking it more seriously. Someone knows you've made contact with Mr. Aldridge if they're still active. Participants who feel threatened by renewed attention, we need to be vigilant. Julian took a seat at the head of the table, and Maya sat across from Claire. Let's start with what we know. Claire opened a laptop and pulled up a presentation. The screen on the wall lit up with a timeline similar to the one Maya had seen in the files. We know Lily was investigating the Argus scandal. We know she made contact with someone claiming to be an insider. We know she went to a meeting and never came home. What we don't know is the identity of Conscience. what exactly happened at that meeting and where Lily's body might be. The clinical language made Maya flinch, but she forced herself to focus. The witness who saw her leave with someone. Do we ever follow up on that? Claire nodded. We did extensive work trying to identify the man. The witness description was vague. Male, average height, dark suit, nothing distinctive. We pulled employment records for everyone connected to the Argus project, but without a better description or any physical evidence, we couldn't narrow it down. It's our biggest frustration. We know someone was with her, but we can't identify them. What about Conscience? Maya asked. The messages Lily received, can we trace them further than we did? Thomas fielded this question. The encryption and VPN usage was sophisticated. We traced the connection through 7 different countries, but the endpoint was a dead drop. A compromised computer in a library that had been remotely accessed. Whoever Conscience was, they knew how to cover their tracks. That level of operational security suggests either professional training or significant paranoia, or both. Julian's voice was quiet. Someone on the inside of a legal surveillance operation would know exactly how to avoid being surveilled themselves. Claire pulled up a new slide showing a list of names. These are the 15 people who worked directly on Argus and weren't charged with crimes. We interviewed all of them, ran background checks, monitored their communications and finances. 5 of them have since left the country. 3 moved to tech companies overseas. 2 were in Europe, citing burnout from the scandal. We kept tabs on them for a year, but found nothing suspicious. Maya studied the faces on the screen, 15 people who might hold the key to her sister's death. What about the ones who stayed? The 10 who are still here, still in the country. Do we think any of them could be Conscience? Claire clicked to a new slide showing detailed profiles. We considered that extensively. The problem is motive. Conscience reached out to Lily offering evidence against Victor. That suggests either genuine whistleblowing or a trap. If it was genuine, why not come forward after Victor's arrest? Why maintain silence when the person you were trying to expose is already in prison, unless they're afraid? Maya's mind was working through the possibility. If Conscience saw what happened to Lily, saw her killed for asking questions, they might be too terrified to come forward even with Victor locked up. Thomas nodded slowly. That's one theory. The other is that Conscience was never real. Just a persona created by Victor or one of his people to lure Lily into a meeting. But that doesn't explain the level of technical sophistication in the communications. The encryption methods used weren't something Victor typically employed. It suggests a different hand, someone with their own agenda. Julian had been quiet, but now he spoke. We're missing something. We're looking at this as if there are only 2 options, genuine whistleblower or trap. What if it's more complicated? What if Conscience was real, but was discovered by Victor's people and eliminated along with Lily? Or what if Conscience was working both sides, providing real information to Lily while also reporting back to Victor? The suggestion opened new pathways of possibility, each one darker than the last. Claire made a note on her laptop. That would explain the silence. If Conscience was compromised or killed, we wouldn't expect them to surface later. Maya felt frustration building. We're going in circles. Every theory we have is based on speculation. We need something concrete, something that can point us in a specific direction. She looked at Claire directly. The messages between Lily and Conscience. Can I see them? The actual content, not just the summaries. Claire glanced at Julian, who nodded. Of course. She pulled up a new document and the screen filled with text. The messages were sparse, professional, exactly what you'd expect from a cautious source contacting a journalist. Conscience had initiated contact through an encrypted messaging platform, identifying themselves only as someone who worked on a classified project at Meridian and had evidence of illegal activity. Lily's responses were measured but eager, asking the right questions, establishing credibility. She'd been careful not to push too hard, not to scare off a potentially valuable source. Maya read through the exchange, hearing her sister's voice in the words, seeing her professional demeanor mixed with barely contained excitement. Then she reached the final messages. The ones that set up the fatal meeting. Conscience had been specific about the time and place, insistent about security protocols. No phones, no recording devices, come alone. Lily had agreed to everything, but there was something in that final exchange that nagged at Maya. She read it again, focusing on the language. Conscience wrote, "The evidence will speak for itself. Once you see what I have, you'll understand the full scope of the corruption." This goes higher than you think. Maya looked up from the screen. Did Lily ever mention what she thought Conscience meant by that? Higher than Victor? Claire nodded. We wondered about that too. In her notes, which we recovered from her cloud backup, Lily speculated that the illegal surveillance operation might involve people outside of Meridian, clients in government or law enforcement who were using Argus for unauthorized purposes. That would explain why someone might kill to keep it quiet. Thomas's expression was grim. If this involved dirty cops or compromised government officials, the stakes would be exponentially higher than just corporate malfeasance. Julian's jaw tightened. We need to look at the client list again. Everyone who purchased access to Argus through Victor's black market operation. Claire pulled up another file. We identified 37 clients over the 18 months Victor was operating. Most were private citizens, suspicious spouses, stalkers. 8 were corporate entities using it for competitive intelligence. But there were 3 clients whose identities we could never fully confirm. The transactions were routed through shell companies in offshore jurisdictions. 3 unknown clients. clients. Maya felt a spark of something, not quite hope, but close to it. Focus. If one of those clients had connections to law enforcement or government, they'd have the resources and motivation to silence anyone who threatened to expose them, and they'd still be out there watching for anyone who got too close to the truth. Thomas was already pulling up additional files on his own tablet. We tried to track those 3 clients for months. The financial trails ended in the Cayman Islands, Cyprus, and Singapore. No names, no addresses, just numbered accounts and encrypted communications with Victor. He looked at Maya, his expression serious. If you're right, if one of these unknown clients was the real power behind the killings, we're dealing with someone significantly more dangerous than Victor Reeves. The room fell silent, everyone processing the implications. Maya felt the weight of what they were considering settling over her like a physical presence. She'd come here looking for answers, but each answer led to darker questions, more dangerous territory. Sarah's warning echoed in her mind. You're not a detective. You don't have training or resources. But she also wasn't the same person who'd served coffee and accepted powerlessness as a fact of life. Lily's death had changed her, and meeting Julian Aldridge had given her a chance to do something she'd never thought possible. Julian broke the silence. Claire, I want you to dig into those 3 unknown clients again. Use every resource we have. Thomas, increase security protocols for everyone in this room. If someone is watching, they need to know we're not easy targets. He turned to Maya, his gray eyes intense. You need to understand what you're getting into. If we keep pulling this thread, we might provoke a response. Are you prepared for that? Maya met his gaze without flinching. They killed my sister because she asked questions. I'm not going to stop asking questions because it might be dangerous. They already took everything that mattered. What else can they take from me? The answer was naive, she knew that. They could take her life, could hurt her parents, could destroy what little stability she'd managed to rebuild. But the alternative, walking away now that she finally had real allies and real resources, felt like betraying Lily's memory. Julian seemed to understand. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. We reconvene in 48 hours. Claire, I want a preliminary report on the unknown clients. Thomas, security assessment and protocols. Maya, you're not to go anywhere alone. Consider yourself under protective surveillance until we know what we're dealing with. As the meeting broke up, Claire approached Maya with a gentleness that seemed at odds with her professional intensity. I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that I meant what I said. This case haunted me. Having a chance to finish it, to get justice for your sister, it matters to me. Maya felt unexpected emotion rising in her throat. Why? You didn't know Lily. You didn't know any of us. Claire's expression shifted, became more personal. 8 years ago, my younger brother was murdered during a robbery. They caught the shooter, but 2 other people were involved and never identified. I know what it's like to have answers, but not justice. If I can help you get both, I will. The shared pain created an instant bond between them. Maya realized she wasn't alone in this, that the people Julian had assembled weren't just hired professionals doing a job. They were invested, they cared, and that made all the difference. She spent the rest of the day at Meridian, going through files in a secure conference room, while Thomas's team set up enhanced security measures. Julian checked in twice, bringing coffee and food she barely touched, his presence somehow comforting despite the circumstances. He didn't try to make small talk or offer empty platitudes. He simply sat with her, working on his own laptop, a silent acknowledgement that she didn't have to process this alone. By evening, Maya's eyes were burning from screen glare and her head throbbed with information overload. Julian finally insisted she'd take a break. You need rest. Tomorrow we start fresh, with new leads and clear minds. He walked her to the private elevator that would take her to the lobby where her security detail waited. As they stood in the hallway, Maya found herself asking the question that had been nagging at her all day. Why are you doing this? Really doing this, I mean. You could have just given me the files and let me handle it on my own. Protected yourself and your company from any fallout. Julian was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable in the dimmed hallway lights. Because I built Meridian on the principle that technology should serve humanity, not exploit it. What Victor did, what happened to your sister, it's the antithesis of everything I claim to believe. His voice dropped, became more raw, and because for 3 years I've been haunted by a ghost, every time I make a decision, I think about whether it would prevent another Lily Chun, whether it would stop another family from experiencing what yours has experienced. Helping you find answers is selfish, really. I need this closure as much as you do. The honesty was unexpected and humanizing. Maya had seen Julian Aldridge as many things, a powerful CEO, a potential villain, an unlikely ally, but in that moment she saw him as simply a man carrying guilt he couldn't shed, trying to make amends for sins that weren't entirely his own but that he'd claimed responsibility for anyway. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. As Maya stepped inside, she turned back to him. Thank you for not turning me away at the restaurant, for not dismissing me as just another crazy person making accusations, for taking this seriously. Julian's expression softened slightly, the closest thing to a real smile she'd seen from him. Your sister was brave to pursue the truth knowing how dangerous it was. You're brave for finishing what she started. That deserves respect, not dismissal. The doors closed and Maya descended through the the building, watching the floor numbers tick down. Tomorrow they would dig deeper into the unknown clients, would pull threads that might unravel conspiracies she couldn't yet imagine. But tonight she allowed herself to feel something other than grief. She felt determination, purpose, and the strange comfort of knowing she had powerful allies in a fight that had seemed impossible just days ago. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of tension and discovery. Maya had taken a leave of absence from Luminaire, a decision that was less voluntary than Richard made it sound when he called. "We think it's best if you take some time to deal with your personal situation." Translation: don't come back until the drama has died down and you're no longer a liability. She should have cared about losing her income, about the bills that would pile up, but the concerns felt distant, irrelevant compared to the investigation consuming her life. She'd moved temporarily into a corporate apartment that Meridian maintained for visiting executives. Julian had insisted, and Thomas had backed him up with security assessments that made her own neighborhood sound like a war zone. The apartment was sterile but comfortable. All modern furnishings and floor-to-ceiling windows with views she couldn't afford in a lifetime of waitressing. A security guard was stationed in the lobby and cameras monitored the hallways. It felt excessive until Maya remembered that someone might actually want her dead. Claire called on the second morning with news that made Maya's pulse quicken. "I think I found something. One of the 3 unknown clients. Can you come to the office?" Maya was dressed and out the door within minutes, her security detail trailing discreetly behind as she made her way to Meridian. The conference room had been transformed into an investigation headquarters, with whiteboards covered in timelines and photographs, laptops displaying data streams, and the accumulated detritus of people working long hours, empty coffee cups, takeout containers, and the faint smell of exhaustion. Claire looked like she hadn't slept, but her eyes were bright with the thrill of a breakthrough. One of the shell companies that paid Victor for Argus's access was registered in Cyprus. We tracked the financial transactions backward through 3 layers of corporate entities, and we finally found a name. She clicked her laptop, and a photograph appeared on the screen. The man was in his 60s, distinguished looking, with silver hair and the kind of face that suggested wealth and privilege. His name is Marcus Holloway, and he's a retired federal agent, former FBI counterterrorism division. The implications hit Maya immediately. A former FBI agent with access to illegal surveillance technology. That's exactly the kind of person who would know how to make someone disappear. Julian entered the room as Claire was pulling up more information. Holloway retired 6 years ago with a full pension and moved into private security consult. His client list is impressive and disturbing. He's worked for foreign governments, corporations involved in sensitive industries, and at least 2 individuals who've been investigated for human rights violations. Thomas added his perspective. "I made some discreet inquiries with contacts in federal law enforcement. Holloway's reputation is mixed. Officially, he was a decorated agent who served his country with distinction. Unofficially, there were always questions about his methods, allegations of crossing ethical lines that were never proven." Maya stared at the photograph, committing every detail to memory. This could be the man who killed Lily. Do we know if he has any connection to the meeting location? Any reason he would have been there that night? Claire pulled up a map showing the building where Lily's meeting was supposed to occur. That's where it gets interesting. The building is owned by a corporate entity that lists Holloway as a security consultant. He had legitimate access to the property, including security codes and camera system. Maya felt her hands clench into fists. He could have disabled the cameras. He could have been waiting there when Lily arrived. We need to be careful. Julian's voice carried a note of caution. Marcus Holloway is not someone we can confront directly without ironclad evidence. If he's involved, he has the skills and connections to be extremely dangerous. More importantly, if he's working for someone else, confronting him might alert others we don't know about yet. Thomas nodded his agreement. We need to surveil him, track his movements and communications, build a complete picture of his activities. But that takes time and resources, and there's a risk he'll detect the surveillance if he's as good as his reputation suggests. Maya felt frustration building. So what do we do? Just watch him from a distance while he walks around free, knowing he might have killed my sister? Claire's expression was sympathetic but firm. We do what investigators do. We build a case piece by piece until we have something that will hold up in court or force him to make a mistake. Rushing in now would only alert him and potentially destroy any chance of justice. The rational part of Maya understood this, but the part of her that had been grieving for 3 years wanted immediate action, wanted to confront this man and demand answers. Over the next week, Claire and Thomas's team worked to build a comprehensive profile of Marcus Holloway. They tracked his financial records, mapped his associates, monitored his communications through legal channels. What emerged was a portrait of a man who lived comfortably but not extravagantly, who maintained relationships with people in positions of power, and who was very, very careful about covering his tracks. He made regular trips to Cyprus, always staying at the same hotel, always meeting with the same handful of individuals whose identities remained frustratingly obscure. Maya attended daily briefings, absorbing information while feeling increasingly helpless. She wanted to be useful, to contribute something beyond her presence as the grieving sister. Julian seemed to sense her frustration. During one particularly tedious afternoon of reviewing financial documents, he suggested they take a walk. The Meridian building had a rooftop garden, an oasis of green in the concrete jungle, and they rode the elevator in silence to the top floor. The garden was empty, the city spreading out around them in all directions. You're struggling with the pace. Julian's observation was gentle, not accusatory. Maya nodded, grateful for his directness. I spent 3 years not knowing what happened, and now that I'm close to answers, every day feels I want to do something, not just sit in meetings while other people work. Julian leaned against the railing, his profile sharp against the sky. I understand the impulse. When I discovered what Victor had done, I wanted to personally hunt down everyone involved. But that's not how justice works, not real justice anyway. Revenge is immediate and satisfying. Justice is slow and frequently frustrating, but it lasts. Maya joined him at the railing, looking out at the city where Lily had lived and died. What if we never get justice? What if Holloway is too careful, too connected? What if we build our case and no prosecutor wants to touch it because it involves a former federal agent? Julian was quiet for a moment. Then we make the information public. We give it to journalists who will run with the story even if law enforcement won't. We use every platform and resource available to ensure that even if Holloway doesn't go to prison, his name is permanently associated with what he did. It won't be perfect justice, but it's something. The conversation shifted to more personal territory. Julian asked about Lily, what she'd been like, and Maya found herself talking about her sister in a way she hadn't been able to since the disappearance. She described Lily's fierce determination, her unwillingness to accept injustice, her belief that exposing the truth could change the world. In many ways, Julian said thoughtfully, you're continuing her work. She would probably be proud of that. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. Or she'd tell me I'm being reckless and stubborn and should let the professionals handle it. Julian smiled slightly. Those aren't mutually exclusive. You can be reckless and stubborn and still be doing the right thing. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I've been thinking about what you asked me, why I'm really doing this. I told you it was guilt, and that's true. But it's also because meeting you reminded me why I built Meridian in the first place. I wanted to create technology that would help people, that would solve problems and make the world better. Somewhere along the way, that vision got corrupted. Helping you find answers is a way of reclaiming that original purpose. Their conversation was interrupted by Thomas, who appeared at the garden entrance looking grim. We have a problem. Back in the conference room, the team had gathered around Claire's laptop. She'd been monitoring Holloway's communications through legally obtained warrants, and something troubling had emerged. He made a phone call an hour ago. Content was vague, but he mentioned knowing someone was asking questions about old business. He told whoever he was talking to that it might be time to clean up loose ends. The implication was chilling. Maya felt cold spread through her chest. He knows we're investigating him. Thomas nodded. It's possible. We've been careful, but if he has contacts in law enforcement or private intelligence, he might have been alerted to the inquiries we've been making. Question is what he means by loose ends. Conscience is still alive, and Holloway knows who they are. This could force his hand. We might be about to witness another murder. Julian's expression hardened. We need to accelerate the timeline. Claire, what do we have that we can take to law enforcement now? Not enough for an arrest warrant. Claire's frustration was evident. We have circumstantial evidence connecting him to the building where Lily disappeared. We have financial records showing he purchased access to Argus. But we don't have physical evidence, witnesses, or a confession. Any competent lawyer would tear it apart. Maya felt panic rising. So, we're just gonna let him kill someone else? There has to be something we can do. Thomas was already on his phone making calls. I'm reaching out to contacts at the FBI. If we share what we have, they might be able to open an official investigation, put surveillance on Holloway that's more comprehensive than what we can legally do. It's a risk because it takes control out of our hands, but it might be the only way to prevent another death. The next hours were a flurry of activity. Federal agents arrived at Meridian, senior investigators who listened to Claire's presentation with grave expressions. They asked pointed questions, examined evidence, and made no promises. One agent, a woman named Sarah Chun, who Maya initially thought might be a relation before realizing it was just unfortunate coincidence, took Maya aside. I want to be honest with you. What you've uncovered is compelling, but it's also complicated. Marcus Holloway has friends in high places, and pursuing him will be politically sensitive. That doesn't mean we won't do it, but it means the process will be slow and careful. Maya felt despair threatening to overwhelm her. How many people have to die before slow and careful becomes urgent? Agent Chun's expression was sympathetic but unyielding. I understand your frustration, but rushing a case like this is how we lose in court. Trust the process even when it feels impossible. As the federal agents left with copies of all the evidence, Maya felt the investigation slipping away from her, becoming something official and bureaucratic and out of her control. Julian found her that evening on the rooftop garden where they'd talked days before. She'd come up here seeking solitude, needing space from the conference room that had become her entire world. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too beautiful for the darkness they were navigating. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, two people united by guilt and determination and the weight of incomplete justice. I keep thinking about what conscience said in that last message. Maya's voice was quiet, almost lost in the evening breeze. This goes higher than you think. What if we're still not seeing the whole picture? What if Holloway isn't the end of the chain, but just another link? Julian turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. I've been thinking the same thing. A retired FBI agent doesn't just decide to start killing journalists on his own. Someone hired him, someone with resources and motivation. Question is who? Maya pulled out her phone, navigating to the files she'd practically memorized over the past weeks. What if we've been looking at this wrong? We've been focused on finding conscience, on identifying who killed Lily, but maybe we should be asking why. Not just to silence her story about Argus, but specifically what part of the story was dangerous enough to justify murder. Julian's eyes sharpened with interest. The client list. The 3 unknown clients. One was Holloway, using it for his own purposes. But the other 2, we still don't know who they are or what they were using Argus for. What if one of those clients was someone so powerful that exposing them would have consequences beyond just corporate scandal? Maya felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. What if Conscience wasn't just offering evidence about Victor's operation, but about who his biggest client was? Julian pulled out his own phone, already texting Claire and Thomas. We need to look at this from a different angle. Not who Conscience was, but what information they were offering. If we can figure out what made that information worth killing for, we can work backward to identify the person with the most to lose. Within 20 minutes, the team was reassembled in the conference room, tired but energized by the new direction. Claire pulled up the original messages between Lily and Conscience, projecting them on the screen. Let's read these, assuming Conscience was trying to tell Lily about a specific client, not just about Victor's operation in general. The messages took on new meaning with that lens. Conscience had written, the surveillance system is being used to target political enemies and silence dissent. People in positions of trust are abusing their power in ways that would destroy public confidence if exposed. Thomas leaned forward, his expression grave. Political enemies. That suggests someone in politics or law enforcement. Someone who would use surveillance to gain advantages over opponents or critics. Claire was already pulling up new files. During the initial investigation, we focused on Victor's operation. But what if we look at who was being surveilled? The targets of the Argus system. Maybe that tells us who was using it. The data was extensive, hundreds of individuals who'd been tracked through the illegal system. But as Claire filtered for patterns, something emerged. A cluster of targets who were all connected to a single senator, Davis Harrington, who'd been running for governor 3 years ago. Maya felt her pulse quicken. The targets included journalists who'd written critical articles about Harrington, political opponents, even members of his own staff who'd raised concerns about campaign finance irregularities. All of them had been surveilled in the months leading up to the election, and Harrington won that election. Julian's voice was tight with controlled anger. He's been governor for 3 years. If he used illegal surveillance to win his seat, and if that came out, it would destroy him, end his career, possibly land him in prison. Thomas was already running searches. Governor Davis Harrington, former federal prosecutor, tough on crime platform, presidential ambitions. He's currently considered a fruitrunner for his party's nomination in the next election cycle. His entire political identity is built on integrity and law and order. Exposure of illegal surveillance would be catastrophic. Claire pulled up more information, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Here's where it gets interesting. Harrington's campaign 3 years ago had a security consultant. Want to guess who? Maya didn't need to guess. Marcus Holloway. Exactly. Claire's face was illuminated by her screen, making her look ghostly in the dimmed room. Holloway worked for Harrington's campaign as their head of security. He had access to campaign strategy, knew who they considered threats, had the connections and expertise to arrange surveillance, and he would have known that if the illegal surveillance was exposed, it would destroy his client and likely implicate him as well. The picture was complete now. Horrifyingly clear. Governor Harrington had used Holloway to purchase illegal surveillance through Victor's operation. They'd tracked Harrington's enemies and critics, giving the campaign an insurmountable advantage. When Lily started investigating Argus, when Conscience reached out with evidence that would connect the dots, Holloway had acted to protect his client and himself. Lily hadn't died because of corporate malfeasance. She'd died because she'd gotten too close to exposing a governor who might one day be president. We need to take this to the FBI now. Julian was already reaching for his phone. This isn't something we can sit on. If Harrington knows we're closing in, he has the resources to disappear evidence, intimidate witnesses, maybe even arrange another accident. But Maya grabbed his arm, stopping him. Wait, if we go to the FBI with accusations against the sitting governor, what happens? They investigate quietly, word leaks, Harrington's people launch a media campaign about politically motivated attacks, and suddenly, we're the villain. We need to force this into the open in a way that can't be buried. Julian studied her face, seeing the determination there. What did you have in mind? Maya's thoughts were racing. 3 years of helplessness crystallizing into clarity. Conscience reached out to a journalist because they wanted the story made public. We have evidence now. We have documentation connecting Holloway to Harrington's campaign, financial records showing the surveillance purchases, and targets who can testify they were illegally tracked. We give it all to journalists, multiple outlets simultaneously, so it can't be suppressed. Thomas looked skeptical. That's dangerous. You're essentially declaring war on a governor and a decorated former FBI agent. They will come after you legally, possibly physically. You need to understand the risk. Maya thought about Lily. about the courage it took to pursue a story knowing it was dangerous. I understand the risk, but if we go through official channels, this gets buried in bureaucracy and political maneuvering. If we make it public, force it into the light they can't hide. Claire nodded slowly. There's precedent for this. Whistleblowers who go public because they don't trust the institutions to handle it properly. It's risky, but it works. Julian made a decision. We do both. We contact the FBI and give them everything, but we also package it for journalists with major outlets. We coordinate releases so the story breaks before anyone can stop it. He looked at Maya directly. But you need to understand, once we do this, your life changes permanently. You become the face of this story. Harrington's people will come after your credibility, dig into your past, try to destroy your reputation. You'll need protection, legal representation, and the strength to withstand a level of scrutiny most people never experience. I've already lost everything that matters. Maya's voice was steady. They took Lily. They took 3 years of my life. My job is gone. My sense of safety is gone. What I have left is the truth and the chance to make sure my sister didn't die for nothing. That's worth any scrutiny they want to throw at me. The team spent the next 18 hours preparing. Claire compiled a comprehensive report, complete with documentation and timelines. Thomas arranged for security teams to protect not just Maya, but also her parents, who would inevitably become targets. Julian contacted journalists at 3 major publications, vetting them carefully to ensure they had the courage and resources to run with a story that would face massive pushback. Maya reached out to her parents, a phone call that had been delayed too long. She'd been avoiding it, not wanting to tell them about Lily until she had complete answers, but the time had come. Her mother answered, her voice carrying the careful hope of someone who'd learned not to expect good news. Maya, sweetheart, how are you? Mom, I need to come see you and Dad. Tonight, I have news about Lily. The silence on the other end lasted several heartbeats. What kind of news? Maya felt tears threatening but kept her voice steady, the kind we need to discuss in person. I'll be there in 2 hours. The drive to her parents' house was the longest of her life, even with Marcus from security at the wheel. She watched the neighborhoods change through the window, moving from the gleaming towers of downtown to the modest streets of her childhood. Her parents lived in the same house where she and Lily had grown up, a small 2-bedroom with a garden her father tended obsessively. They were waiting at the door when she arrived, her mother's face tight with anxiety, her father's hand resting protectively on her shoulder. Maya saw how much they'd aged in 3 years, how the uncertainty had carved lines into their faces and dimmed the light in their eyes. She sat them down at the kitchen table where they'd shared thousands of meals, and she told them everything. About the restaurant, about Julian Aldridge, about the investigation, and Marcus Holloway and Governor Harrington, and finally the truth they'd been dreading. Lily was gone, had been gone since that October evening 3 years ago, killed for asking the wrong questions of the wrong people. Her mother wept silently, tears streaming down her face while her body remained perfectly still, as if movement would shatter what remained of her composure. Her father held his wife's hand, his expression carved from stone, absorbing the confirmation of what he'd probably known deep down but refused to accept. When Maya finished, when there were no more words to soften the horror, her father spoke. What happens now? Now we make sure the people responsible face consequences. Maya outlined the plan, the simultaneous release to law enforcement and media, the public exposure that would make Lily's death impossible to ignore or bury. Her mother reached across the table and took Maya's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Your sister would be proud of you. Terrified for you, but proud. Promise me you'll be careful. These people have already shown what they're capable of. Maya promised, though they all knew that careful had limits when confronting killers with resources and desperation. She stayed with her parents through the night, sleeping in her childhood bed while security guards watched the house from an unmarked vehicle on the street. It felt surreal, like being a child again while simultaneously bearing adult burdens her younger self could never have imagined. The release was coordinated for maximum impact. At 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 3 major publications simultaneously posted stories online. The headlines varied slightly, but the message was consistent. Governor Davis Harrington had used illegal surveillance to win his election, and a young journalist had been murdered to keep it secret. The stories included documentation, timelines, and quotes from Maya Chun, whose sister had died pursuing the truth. Within an hour, the story was national news. Cable networks interrupted regular programming for breaking coverage. Social media exploded with outrage and disbelief. Governor Harrington's office issued a statement denying everything, calling it a politically motivated smear campaign, but the evidence was too substantial to dismiss easily. The FBI, presented with the same information the morning before the story broke, had no choice but to announce an official investigation. Agents descended on Harrington's offices and Holloway's residence with search warrants. Marcus Holloway was arrested attempting to board a private flight to Cyprus, a go bag containing cash, multiple passports, and encrypted hard drive. The news cycle moved with breathtaking speed. By afternoon, Harrington had given a press conference, his careful composure cracking as reporters asked pointed questions he couldn't answer. By evening, members of his own party were calling for his resignation. By the next morning, impeachment proceedings had begun. Maya watched it all from the safety of the Meridian building, surrounded by security and legal teams. She'd given one carefully crafted interview to a journalist Claire trusted, telling Lily's story in her own words. making her sister real for an audience that might otherwise see her as just another statistic. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in from strangers who'd been touched by the story. Advocacy groups focused on press freedom and government accountability reached out offering assistance. But there were also threats, angry messages from Harrington's supporters, accusations that Maya was a liar seeking attention and money. Julian had prepared her for this, but the reality of it was still jarring. Thomas assigned additional security, monitoring threats and ensuring Maya was never exposed. The legal team fielded defamation threats from Harrington's lawyers, responding with counterfilings and additional evidence. It was a war fought in courtrooms and conference rooms, and the court of public opinion. 3 days after the story broke, Marcus Holloway's lawyer contacted the FBI with an offer. In exchange for testimony against Governor Harrington and a reduced sentence, Holloway would provide details about everything, including what had happened to Lily Chun. Maya sat in a secure FBI facility, watching through one-way glass as Holloway was brought in for his proffer session. He looked smaller than his photograph suggested. A man in his 60s wearing an orange jumpsuit, and the resigned expression of someone who knew his life was over. Agent Sarah Chun, who'd taken the lead on the investigation, conducted the interview with clinical precision. Holloway spoke in a monotone, describing how he'd been hired by Harrington's campaign to ensure victory by any means necessary. He'd purchased access to Victor's Argus system and used it to surveil everyone who posed a threat to Harrington's ambitions. When Lily Chun started investigating, Holloway had monitored her communications, saw her making contact with someone claiming to be an insider. He'd realized the threat she posed and made a decision. He hadn't killed her himself, he claimed, but had hired 2 associates to intercept her at the meeting and make her disappear. The details were horrifying in their banality. They'd approached her pretending to be Conscience, had walked her to a vehicle saying they needed to go somewhere more secure to exchange information. Once in the vehicle, they'd injected her with a sedative. She died from an allergic reaction to the drug, something they hadn't anticipated. They'd panicked, Holloway said, his voice devoid of emotion, describing it like a failed business transaction rather than a murder. They'd disposed of her body in an industrial waste facility that was scheduled for demolition. The building had been torn down weeks later, any physical evidence destroyed with it. Lily's remains were likely buried under a new development that now housed luxury condos. The knowledge that her sister's final resting place was a parking garage under high-rise apartments felt like a violation. On top of the violation of her death, Maya sat in that observation room, tears streaming silently down her face as Holloway detailed how casually they'd ended Lily's life and erased her existence. Julian sat beside her, his hand finding hers, offering silent support as they listened to the confession that would finally bring something resembling justice. Holloway's testimony was devastating for Governor Harrington. Within 2 weeks, the state legislature voted to impeach him. Rather than face a trial, Harrington resigned, issuing a statement that accepted responsibility without admitting to specific crimes. His political career was over, his ambitions turned to ash. Federal prosecutors charged him with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and violation of civil rights. His trial was scheduled for the following year. Marcus Holloway pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, conspiracy, and a list of other charges. In exchange for his testimony, he received 30 years instead of life. His associates, identified through his confession, were arrested in different states. One pleaded guilty immediately, the other chose to fight and lost. Justice was slow and imperfect, but it was happening. The identity of Conscience remained a mystery. Holloway claimed he'd never discovered who had reached out to Lily, that the person had vanished after her death, too afraid to come forward. Some leads suggested it might have been a mid-level programmer who'd seen the client list and been horrified by its implications. Others thought it was someone closer to Victor who'd grown a conscience too late. Whoever they were, they'd succeeded in starting the chain of events that brought down a corrupt governor, even if they'd done it at the cost of an innocent life. Maya stood at a small ceremony 6 months after the story broke. The journalism school Lily had graduated from was naming a scholarship in her honor, awarded annually to students pursuing investigative journalism. Maya's parents were there, her mother still fragile but showing signs of healing, her father standing straighter as if the burden he'd carried had finally been lifted. Sarah had come, and surprisingly several of Maya's former co-workers from Luminaire, including Richard, who'd apologized profusely and offered her job back. Julian Aldridge stood at the back of the room, having funded the scholarship but refusing any public recognition. He caught Maya's eye and offered a small nod, a shared acknowledgement of how far they'd both come. Maya had been asked to speak, to say something about Lily that would inspire the next generation of journalists willing to ask dangerous questions. She stood at the podium, looking out at faces young and old, and found words that felt true. My sister believed that truth was more powerful than lies, that exposing corruption was worth the risk, and that one person asking the right questions at the right time could change the world. She paused, emotion catching in her throat. She was right. Lily died pursuing a story that needed to be told, and in doing so, She started a chain reaction that brought justice, not just for her, but for everyone who'd been victimized by people who believed power put them above the law. The world needs more people like Lily, people willing to stand up and speak out even when it's dangerous, even when it costs them everything. The students in the audience listened with the intensity of youth encountering purpose, some seeing for the first time that journalism could be more than a career, it could be a calling. After the ceremony, Maya found a quiet moment alone in the university's garden. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photograph of Lily, the same one she'd kept on her bookshelf for 3 years. Her sister smiled back at her, frozen in a moment of pure joy that death couldn't erase. "I did it," Maya whispered to the image. "I finished what you started. I made sure they couldn't bury the truth." She felt the weight she'd been carrying finally begin to lift, not completely, never completely, but enough that she could breathe again. Julian found her there as the sun began to set, and the light caught his face at an angle that made him look less like the intimidating CEO and more like just another person carrying scars that didn't show. "What's next for you?" he asked. Maya considered the question. She'd been offered positions at advocacy organizations, opportunities to speak about press freedom and government accountability. Meridian had offered her a job in their newly created ethics oversight division. Her parents wanted her to come home to be close while they all healed together. All good options, all paths that made sense. "But I think I want to finish what Lily started in another way." Maya surprised herself with the answer. "I want to tell stories. Real stories about people who've been silenced in systems that need to be exposed. I'm not a journalist like she was, but I understand now that there are different ways to pursue the truth." Julian smiled, the expression transforming his usually severe features. "You'll be good at it. You've already proven you have the courage and the stubbornness. If you ever need resources or support, you know where to find." They stood together in the garden as darkness fell. Two people bound by tragedy who'd managed to forge something meaningful from the wreckage. The story of Lily Chun's death and the corruption it exposed became a case study in journalism school, a cautionary tale about the costs of pursuing truth and an inspiration for those willing to pay that cost. Maya Chun became an unexpected advocate and storyteller, using platforms she'd never imagined, having to ensure that her sister's sacrifice wasn't forgotten. Governor Harrington's trial resulted in a conviction and a 20-year sentence. Marcus Holloway served his time in a federal facility, denied parole despite good behavior. The associates who'd actually killed Lily received life sentences without the possibility of parole. And on October evenings, when the air turned crisp and the light slanted golden through the city streets, Maya would sometimes find herself walking past the building where Lily had gone to her last meeting. She didn't go there to mourn anymore. She went to remember, to feel close to her sister, and to renew her commitment to the work Lily had died doing. Because some numbers brand themselves into your memory like scars that never quite fade, and some losses transform into purpose that gives the rest of your life meaning. Maya had learned that the hard way. Through 3 years of searching and weeks of danger and a moment of recognition that changed everything, she'd learned that truth could be buried but never destroyed. That justice might be delayed but wasn't always denied. And that love for someone lost could become the fuel that brings down empires built on lies.